Is the first president ever impeached twice, but we still don't know much of anything about what his trial in the Senate will look like. Maybe that will change right now. Joining us, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. She's a delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands and one of the House impeachment managers. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We had one of your colleagues on yesterday, and I know you've only begun your preliminary meetings as House managers and haven't made every decision yet. But let me start by going rapid fire through a few key issues to see if there are answers yet. Number one, when will the trial begin?
That is yet to be determined.
Number two, how long will the trial last?
That is yet to be determined.
Number three, how many witnesses do you intend to call at this time?
That is yet to be determined.
So I get the sense there's a lot that's yet to be determined in terms of how this trial will go. So how are you then preparing?
Sure, we're working as a team. The impeachment managers are meeting regularly, consistently, round the clock. We have an incredible team working with us, staff that are really outstanding, and we are going to announce things as they become, evident and appropriate at that point in time.
I fully understand. In terms of witnesses, what are the considerations that are going into how many and whether to call them at all?
Well, I don't want to discuss our strategy at this point and the deliberations that we're having. I think what would be more appropriate is for you all to see the witnesses when we have that witness list and have proffered that to the Senate along with our evidentiary evidence. I think that that would be the appropriate time to really talk about that. And then you can parse out the rationale and the strategy behind it.
What do you think you need to prove in the trial?
I think we need to prove the facts as in the indictment, really, correct? An impeachment is really kind of the grand jury meeting, an indictment stating that there are sufficient evidence and sufficient reason to hold this person, this official accountable, to take those over to the Senate and for the Senate to act as jurors with the Chief Justice acting as the judge. And we will present the case against Donald J. Trump to state why he has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and that his continued hold on the office of the presidency is a clear and present danger to the United States.
In the impeachment, which is akin to an indictment, he is charged with inciting an insurrection. One of the defenses that we have learned that he may mount from whoever he has as his lawyers, which we don't even know yet to be sure about that, is that they will suggest that his speech on the 6th, prior to the mob attacking the Capitol, the mob that he said, go to the Capitol, they are going to argue it is protected speech. Your response?
Sure, of course they're going to argue that. We've been wondering what their convoluted argument is going to be, but not all speech is protected speech. Not all speech, and particularly speech which causes harm, which one knows and has a reasonable belief, as well as an intent to cause harm, will in fact do that. Listen, President Donald Trump has engaged in a prolonged effort to not only overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and maintain his grip on power, but he has done that to the detriment of our democracy. He would rather have our democracy fall apart than he lose the presidency. That is what we are going to prove. We're going to prove that he knew what he was doing, that he incited the crowd, and that's what, the things that are charged in the impeachment are going to be proven when we go to the Senate.
In fact, not an hour ago, I was speaking to Ken Cuccinelli, who's the Deputy Homeland Security Secretary, acting Deputy Homeland Security Secretary, who said part of the online chatter they're hearing, and there's a great deal of online chatter, we're told, about possible threats on the U.S. Capitol and in all 50 states in the next few days. Part of the online chatter is insisting that Donald Trump still won the election. This is part of the threat that is coming from people who may or may not launch attacks around the country. And President Trump this week, the New York Times reports, is still telling people he won the election. How will that factor in, or what role do you think that plays in the argument you will make?
Well, I don't want to talk about what the argument we will make and what our strategy is going to be, John. But what I can say is that this president has been engaged in lying even before he was president. I mean, you, the media, have listed the hundreds of thousands of lies perpetrated by the president during this term in office, and it continues. And, whether it's falsely claiming that he won by a landslide, that the election was stolen, that the results are fraudulent, or claiming that the coronavirus does not, in fact, kill individuals, is under control, and is will be go away in a couple of months. All and everything coming out of his mouth seems now to have been a lie and is a lie, and that is a clear and present danger not only to our democracy but to the American people and their very lives.
To be clear, that's why I brought it up, because the lie is still part of the online chatter that has people so concerned about attacks over the next few days. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, we appreciate you coming on. I do understand it's the early stages of planning. Please come back and talk to us again as it gets closer to the trial date.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So